Jeff and Jesse dropping some science for you here on testosteronesports.com. It's great to be with you, Jeff. This segment is all about the biggest trade in the NFL this offseason, and one of the biggest trades in NFL recent memory, a marquee quarterback, Jay Cutler. Big waves being made early this offseason. There was some disgruntled problems between he and his new coach, Josh McDaniels. He heard the team had been shopping him, wanting to move in Matt Castle. A whole problematic situation ensued. The bottom line is Cutler has been shipped off to the Bears, who gave up 2 first-rounders and Kyle Orton and a 3rd-rounder to bring in Cutler. Which of these teams won that trade?
You know, I personally feel like the Broncos got the better end of that trade. They have so many different needs on their team. These picks are going to go a long way in building for the future for this team. They got Kyle Orton. I like Orton as far as a developing player. I know he's not as good, or he doesn't have quite the upside that Jay Cutler has, but he did put up nearly 3,000 yards last year, 18 touchdowns, and now he steps into an offense that boasts 2 very, very good receivers. Brandon Marshall, Eddie Royal combined for 195 receptions last season. Now, we don't know what's going on with Brandon Marshall. There could be a looming suspension coming here, but at the same time, their offense gets a little bit of a boon here. They get the extra picks. I think it's going to work well for them going forward.
And looking at the Bears, I mean, from our perspective, being Vikings fans that we are here at Testosterone Sports, this is a big shakeup. I mean, obviously Cutler has a huge arm. There are some questions as far as his wide receivers that he's going to be operating with. What do you think Cutler is going to bring to this Bears offense? Last year and in the past, it's been a pretty run-oriented offense.
Yeah, well, Cutler broke out last season, 4,500 yards. He was in the top 5 or so in throwing the ball, and he has a lot of good poise in the pocket. He makes good decisions and goes through his reads very, very well. So I think that the Bears now have a franchise-type quarterback. And Jesse, it's not very often that a franchise quarterback gets moved in the NFL.
Right.
This is almost like a coup. The Bears really got a guy that they can hang their hats on for several years to come, and as things go for them, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in their receiving core because they don't have a lot of talent there. They got a couple of younger names. I like Greg Olsen as a tight end sleeper a lot for fantasy players.
And one player that comes to mind right off of the get-go here for me is Devin Hester. We all know the guy's return prowess has been unmatched in NFL history for a young guy. He's got game-breaking speed. He's a guy that some fantasy owners took a shot on last year. He really didn't produce. Do you think he can make bones this year with Cutler throwing the deep ball? Is he a guy that should be back on the fantasy radar again right now?
Well, I think you have to say so. I mean, his upside is definitely very, very large. He's excellent at stretching the field because of that blazing speed. I know that there's a rumor floating around within the Bears organization about whether or not he'll continue to return the ball. If he's not returning kickoffs and punts, I think they're crazy, because their scheme works so very well when he's got the ball in his hands and has the entire field to work with. He's great at finding the seam, and the rest of the Bears special teams are really, really good at getting him that opening. So I think that difference-making ability in the special teams can really play a factor in the games that they play. So I think that they'd be smart to keep him there. And there's a younger guy who I like named Earl Bennett, who I think could step up and end up starting on the other side of Hester, and that could provide a pretty nice punch. The kid I like the most now, though, Matt Forte.
Interesting, very interesting. Looking back at the Broncos side, one thing that I feel definitely happens with the move to ship Cutler out, one player that it really hurts, in my opinion, Jeff, is Eddie Royal. We were seeing this guy throughout the offseason in mock drafts getting taken as early as round 5 and round 6. Eddie Royal's going to have a lot harder time with a quarterback that doesn't have the Cutler-esque arm, in my opinion. Out of all the players in this scenario, I believe Eddie Royal's value dropped the most.
Well, I'll tell you that depending on what size of suspension that Brandon Marshall gets for yet another off-the-field incident.
What a punk.
I know. If he would just kind of settle down and perform on the field and stay at home when he's not out there, he would be an all-pro for a few years. I think Eddie Royal's going to have a hard time facing against the double team. So when Marshall's on the field, the Broncos are a totally different team. Without him, they're going to be one-dimensional, and they still haven't settled on a running back. They brought in Lamont Jordan. They brought in Correll Buckhalter.
That's
several
a mess.
other names.
That's
they still have Selvin Young, Peyton Hillis. I mean, they could trade or try to sign Larry Johnson if he were to get cut, you know.
Don't you think right now Broncos owner Pat Bowlen is really kicking himself for moving Mike Shanahan out and bringing in this young, very unproven Bill Belichick clone here?
I sure would be if it were me. You know, Pat Bowlen kind of pulled the trigger a little bit soon. I know that Mike Shanahan had a very long tenure in Denver, but he brought the city 2 Super Bowls.
Right.
And, you know, he's always had a lot of good success. He knows football, and don't be surprised if he might sit out 1 year and then find another spot, maybe even in the land of the purple.
Well, that's us breaking down the Cutler trade. Don't go away. We've got more knowledge coming up next. We're going to be talking about Tom Brady and Matt Castle here on TestosteroneSports.com.